This is Dr. Brad, Montana at Your Health Reclaimed, where we expose the root cause of Lyme and chronic illness so you can finally heal. The root causes are what really create all the problems that are out there, and those are pretty extensive. So we're going to continue the talk with Dr. Mike Haley. And you never know what we're going to get into when we get together, but it's always an interesting talk, and we're covering a whole bunch of different topics. So this will be good. We're going to get back into this. So here we go.
What are the changes that you need to make that happen?
Gut integrity is top of the list. I've never seen something contrary to the fact that the gut's the hardest organ system in the body to heal.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got to start from that understanding. The lining of the gut, it replaces itself every 24 hours. Oh, it's the fastest.
Well, if that's the case, then you should actually be able to get relatively quick results.
No, because it's where all the war happens. Anybody with a gut problem, anytime there's a leaky gut, you've got an autoimmune response going on inside of the lining of the gut, the mucosa and the submucosa just underneath that. You've got an autoimmune war going on whenever it leaks, whenever there's inflammation, that leaks. And the microvilli that look like your fingers, atrophy, that look like your knuckles, there's no surface area left. Or no surface area, all the microbes sweep out, pathogens grow. Our immune system doesn't keep those pathogens in check. It's the healthy microbes. So to restore the integrity of the gut, you've got to restore a healthy microbial coating, the flora, which there's no basis for it to hide. So you got to rebuild that gut lining, restore that microvilli, decrease the thickening of the lining in there, calm the immune system down, deal with food intolerances and all of the other things. You got to do that while you're supporting everything else. You got to figure out which of the detox pathways is the most inhibited, how you support that. And everybody that writes papers on it doesn't know what they're talking about. They cut and paste the same trash that has no clinical relevance whatsoever.
I heard Jordan Rubin talk about crowding out the bad microflora with good. Is that possible?
The flora alone won't do it. You've got to do a combination of the right anti-microbial issues along with a good healthy flora. Now, right now, my wife and I, we've tested probably thousands of different supplements. We go into health food stores and just as a inquisitive thing, we just start testing product. We go into all kinds of stores and we test things, foods and all that. So, we've got a huge basis of things. Right now, I know of only 2 sources of flora that have any integrity to do what they should do of all the companies. And we've had to have tested hundreds of varieties.
Can you share your favorite brands?
Let's see here. I believe it's both out of the same company as Claire. They're Vital 10 and they're Vital Plex, and it depends on what's going on, what you're going to use. But those are the only 2 that actually colonize and do what you need to. You look at flora, you have a very similar flora in the small intestine and the colon. SIBO actually happens when the transit from the colon goes backwards, goes in the small intestine, and then infects the small intestine with stuff that should be more in the colon. A woman's reproductive tract has basically the same flora as her colon does. We got all of the same flora inside of our nasal cavity, inside of our ears. All our mucous membranes are coated with all that stuff. So you've got to combine different things, and those change with really everything. Clostridia, if there's an issue with Clostridia, it rules, and you got to deal with that before you can do anything else, because what wipes out a lot of really virulent issues makes Clostridia grow. And so you got to have these diagnostic tools to figure all this stuff out. You can't cookbook it like what you said before. You can't just go, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's always combinations of things, and those change as you go on. So it's
Test. Muscle test specifically.
when you look at it, um, our diagnostic testing, the lab tests are just not very accurate. They were used to change the course of medicine. They're to find symptoms, not root causes. And that's just a reality. People won't argue with that, but they're going to lose argument. The history just proves it out. Now, it's not time to really discuss that right now, but you got that. You have dark field or live cell microscopy. The problem with that is you can't determine species. And there's no way to test a therapy. You have electrodiagnostic testing, which is a great marketing tool, but it has a reasonable accuracy to find where problems are, but it can't tell the extent or the cause. And without being able to tell those, its therapeutic intervention falls on its face. And we've shared patients with people who use that for decades. Almost none of their stuff works. And that's basically the reason why. And I'm talking research. I'm not talking about my opinion. My book's got the references of that research out there. And the last one's muscle testing. And the real issue with muscle testing is most people don't use it with integrity. Mm-hmm. And there's where your problem is. You can't have a bias. You can't try and fit everybody in a box. You can't have your favorite thing that everybody's going to have. You can't have your favorite therapies. It's a tool to test and prove things out. It's like algebra. Algebra, you got to show your work. And with muscle testing, you got to cross test to confirm things. Because the first thing might not be true.
To muscle test, do you have to have like a product in hand, or can it be tested remotely?
We figure out a way to test that remotely. But, first of all, you got to use it for diagnostics.
And can that be done remotely?
And we figured out how to do it all remotely. And, that was an interesting thing years ago when Lord was moving us. And we had people begging us to figure out how to work with them at distance. I didn't have a belief system for it, but the change in dynamics changes your viewpoint. It's like, okay, so another time that I got to deal with my belief system and see if I can figure out a way to do it. We start testing people further and further distance. And the end reality, we was testing people we didn't know who they were, what they had. Do like 200 tests on them, then bring them in office, and the results were identical. No difference, which is statistically impossible, and that's a God thing. I can't not do what I do if he's not directing it, and that's me. You've got results that are, I've never heard of anybody that's got close to what we have. Where I used to live, friend of mine, the VP from a nutritional company, said I was one of the top 3 docs in that part of the country. And I knew who the other 2 were. Those 2 could not touch or deal with any of the people we dealt with the complexity. They were big names in big cities. I was a small name in a small town dealing with just impossible things. And they just had no ability to deal with what we were dealing with. And that's God. That's not because I'm that great. That's because he's so great in me.
Because you let him, yes.
And, that's just an absolute requirement. But that's where we started with that stuff. We were testing somebody in Australia. So we're talking over halfway around the world. Like 14 hours difference from where we're at. And we're doing a home inspection for toxicity. And I get to a certain spot and I say, stop. Where are you at? What room in the house you're in? They were in the kitchen. And I have them put their hand out and start moving around. I go, it's right in there. And they go, oh, wow, that's amazing. That's this nuclear glow-in-the-dark soap that I've been meaning to throw away for 5 years, and there it is, and you found it. Said, take
Hmm.
it outside, and the rest of the kitchen was clean, and I keep going, and I say, stop. Same thing. Where are you at? Move your hand around. Right there. What is that? And he goes, I can't believe you. You guys are the real deal. I was just reaching for a toxic can of paint when you stopped me. It can be that accurate if you
Right.
allow him
Hmm.
to direct you without having an agenda.
That's good. Do you think you could have mastered it as you did without the time you spent fasting and
No way.
right?
Um, I traveled the world, around different parts of the country, and I've traveled the world doing ministry and things like that. I've been around, some of my primary fellowship was apostles and prophets for a decade, and they accepted me as one of them in that. They, almost all of them, run on pretense. Every one of them has a portfolio, a notebook full of their favorite sermons that they just recycle, and it's old manna that's from 20, 30 years ago. It's never fresh. A friend of mine said of me, you're the only one I've ever seen of all ministers anywhere who spends time with the Lord and brings a fresh message to every audience you come to. Yeah, and that's the difference between preaching and teaching. Preaching, you spend time fasting and praying to get a hold of the heart of God so he can show you what's going on and what people need, where you're at. Teaching is doing a lot of intellectual gymnastics to try and understand truth. The two go together. They really go together. You can't do one without the other. But in all the travels and everything, I've never seen anybody as spiritual authority that doesn't have a lifestyle of fasting and prayer. And Jesus makes that pretty clear.
This kind only comes out with prayer and fasting.
Right, that's exactly it. And that's not a once in a lifetime issue. The context of that is a lifestyle of prayer and fasting.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm kind of chuckling as I think of some of the challenges that I've had in my business. And we would import aloe vera from the Dominican Republic, but things kind of went south in that relationship. COVID kind of threw people off, kind of killed work ethics, quality kind of dropped, kind of thing. And we switched our supplier. And it's always easier to have someone else do the work and produce for you. But again, we're having quality issues and spending all kinds of money and throwing a lot of product away because it didn't meet my standard. And I'm laughing because I'm not knowing what direction to go. There's another option, which is produce here locally, which might cost a little bit more, and I'm going to have to trust God a lot more.
This is something that brings up that this is my own attitude, my own unbelief in things, but I think it's more true. You keep seeing corporate America, you see these mom and pop places, they build a good product line, and instead of having a vision to supply work for their family forever, they want to sell big and go waste their life away in some resort place or whatever they want to do with things. And that really doesn't make a lot of sense. My argument when I contact companies that are putting things that destroy the integrity of their thing, we would gladly pay the extra cost for the quality.
Yeah.
Gladly.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's so funny about it is I could be a little hard headed and someone who tries to help other people hear the voice of God, I'm not hearing them. And my prayer is kind of like, well, God, are you just seeing how far I can be stretched. I mean, I could be stretched. And I'm throwing freight container after freight container. We threw 3 freight containers of product away, 40-foot containers. I paid for it all. And one of them, this is funny, it got held up in customs because of a paperwork error. That was not my problem. And I was charged over $700 a day for the 3.5 weeks that it was in a prison with customs, just them holding on to it, only for them to finally deliver and find out that the container was set at the wrong temperature, had to throw it all away. So bouncing off, walls here, trying to figure out, okay, God, what am I supposed to be doing? And as I'm talking to a friend in church, which I think, anytime people are having a challenge, talk to someone. Even if someone gives you the wrong answers, sometimes you recognize it as the wrong answer and then you know what you're supposed to do. But he had the right answer. As I was telling him our new challenges, and if we produce locally, the farm is kind of at that line where a freeze could come and wipe out all of our crops. And then we're out of business for 3 to 5 years as we're trying to regrow those crops. And the farm happens to be for sale and we can't afford it. So if someone comes in and buys it, we might not have a business. So because of all these challenges, I'm thinking, well, that can't be the right way to go. And he kind of laughed at me and said, so if you do that in Florida, you're going to have to trust God more. It's like, oh, you're so right.
There's other things that you can do that people don't think about.
Well, in this case, let me say, since that conversation I had with him, we went that direction, and it's only been blessings since.
Interesting.
And mostly,
How many plants do you need to supply what your need is? And what kind of acreage does that take?
well, that's a funny thing too, because I calculated it a few years ago to be about 30 acres, what we would need to not only sustain our current business, but even grow a little bit.
Interesting.
And the farm happens to be 33 acres.
Interesting.
So
What did they grow on it before?
It's always been aloe vera there, as far as I know, but they have a few other things growing too, like avocado trees and a little bit of sugar cane, but it's mostly aloe. I thought it was cool going there and working with them, and I never had raw sugar cane before. Chop it down and show us how to chew on it, and that was a very neat experience. There's some chickens running around with the farm fresh eggs and picking up the avocados that just fell off the tree and were perfect. We should all be living a lot more like that.
Yeah. It's so has he ever had frost wipe out his aloe vera plants?
No, but the orange fields in Florida have been damaged, but we haven't had that probably in 20 years where it was
oranges
the
are a
frost
lot
that wiped out
higher up off the ground than aloe vera. And
Hmm.
there's things like shade cloths, and I don't know, 30 acres is too much to cover things with, but there are simple things you can do to increase the protection of your growing space, like walls around gardens, increase or decrease that garden space like 2 zones. We had what was called a walled pinia in our old place. It was a foundation, an old house just made into a garden. And what grew in there was radically different than just the other side of the wall. That's a French concept. You can look up wallopinias.
You've probably learned a lot about this through your travels too.
I think I've learned more things through my wife than through that. She's an avid gardener. Her dad was a gardening genius, a soil genius, and her love for doing things has made me have to look into things that I normally wouldn't have had to look into, and that's where I got a hold of the molecular physiology, and it's the same for soil as it is for us and all life forms. See, it's interesting. God didn't waste his ideas in having to make something new for everything. Everything works off the same basic systems, same basic pH, same basic nutrient needs, all life forms. And it doesn't matter whether it's soil or mammals or whatever you want to talk about, it's all the same.
Yeah, along those lines, I was on a recent podcast, the Ashley James Learn True Health podcast, and we were talking about how everything really comes from feces, because soil really is feces. And if you want really good soil, you have worm castings, or fertilizer is manure. And whether it's the bacteria that are consuming and excreting, or the larger bugs and lizards, or the bigger animals that are walking on top of the earth, or even the mushrooms that are growing on the fallen trees, and everything's getting continuously turned over and excreted. For the most part, it's all a bunch of feces. Now, the humorous part came in when we were talking about the Lord made us from the dust of the earth. And, we from dust we were formed. And yeah, you know where we're going with this. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I don't know if that was a compliment, but essentially, we come from the dust, we return to the dust, and it's all consumed and turned around in circles and over and over and over. And that is the planet we live on. When you were talking about the molecular structure of things and how everything's moving, is that going back to the fact that like the very chairs we're sitting on aren't necessarily solid because it's a bunch of stuff that's moving? Is that the same kind of energy that we're tapping
You
into
know,
when we're doing muscle testing?
you remind me of something, a reality of physics that you could drive you insane if you want to take this to levels of minutia. But you can never really touch anything because there's always a certain amount of space between you and something else. So you can't truly sit on a chair. There's space between you and the chair. You got couple layers of clothes at least in some areas of the body, sometimes more than that, but there's always some air space and some other things. And then the chair is full of microbes and the clothes got microbes on it, and you got all these things. If you look at an electron micrograph picture of like a leaf or your skin, you can't see the leaf, you can't see the skin. It's just coated solid in microbes. Layers thick, and it'll drive you nuts after a while.
Funny, the reality of life.
Somebody asked me a little while ago about structured water, and said there's no such thing.
Structured water?
Yeah, he goes,
It moves too fast.
What are you talking about? I said, well, matter has three different states. Gas has no structure. Liquid has no structure. Solids have structure. That's a crystal. As far as water goes, it's the only way you can structure water. It's a marketing ploy to sell some overpriced contraption to do something that it can't possibly do. That's how you structure water. You freeze it.
Yeah, I've always said if you could structure the molecules, and the concept that it's sold on is that they fit closer together, well, then I should be able to fit more of those molecules in a gallon. And therefore the gallon should be heavier, but it's not.
Well, the interesting thing of heavy water is steam distilled. It has no impurities in it. That's how you get heavier water. You get rid of the minerals. You get rid of the impurities, and that's the heaviest water.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that comes from Kerry Reams. That's what they use for studying all your nuclear physics. Steam distilled water.
Interesting.
Everybody in the nutritional industry thinks you need to have nutrients in your water. No, you don't. You can't absorb them. They're in the wrong form. We only absorb chelated minerals. There's no chelated minerals in water. They're crystal form.
What about in the forms of food, though, like coconut water?
Coconut's an estrogen disruptor. I would never recommend it because it just wrecks people's physiology as far as that goes. I haven't really looked at things. It would be more likely inside of a plant that you would have chelated minerals instead of crystalline form, as it's the microbes in the soil that convert the minerals into phosphate form, which is the only form that the roots of plants can absorb. And plants take up the phosphate form, they deposit the phosphates in their leaves in different structures, but they convert those minerals and usable forms into the chelated forms. And that's the only form we can absorb. So if you get a plant sourced mineral, say calcium from spinach, kale, your crucifers, your things along that line, you can absorb it, but you can't get it from a rock form, a crystalline form.
Well, I know there's people that think that you shouldn't drink any water because all your hydration should come from fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, Dr. Teller Ryan, one of the biggest cancer experts in the world, is one of those. But if you look at his diet, it's heavy in watermelon and things along that line. These high water content fruits and vegetables that can grow where he lives. And down where you're at, that may be possible. But what about somebody in northern Minnesota?
Yeah, he is the one that said that to me.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah, interesting. Because I've heard him say the same thing, and that's why I said that. He's one of the biggest
Yeah.
proponents of that. But people that know him, they'll say, well, you look at his diet.
Oh.
If he was drinking healthy water, it'd be fine to drink.
What about you? Where do you get your hydration and your calories from? How do you know what to eat and what do you choose to eat?
I just this weekend went up and patched in 2 cisterns. I've got a spring that comes down into cisterns. If I fix the one, that'll give us about 1,500 gallons of storage in these cisterns. I built one out of brick. It's 4 foot tall, 6'2" diameter. That's 900 gallons. One below that's like 375, and one that I patched a couple days ago, I think I filled it with water because it was leaking through the brick that I added on top of the other stuff. Anyway, that's where I get ours. We've got a well, but the water is just not usable, and it really needs to be bleached because it's got a very strong sulfur smell, which that comes from bacteria that grows in it. So it really needs to be bleached, and I can do that, but I just choose to not use it. So that's the issue. You look at different places like where you're at, I would imagine your water table's pretty low. The best water you could get down there would be Sandpoint wells.
Yeah, in well, side of my house, I noticed a little hole forming. It might seem like a sinkhole or something like that, and I started poking a piece of PVC into it, and the ground started giving away, and I ended up with a hole about 6 inches wide, and by the time I got about 4 feet deep, it was splashing. So,
Yeah, and I'm thinking you say that you hear people, and this is one of those things about foundations. People always try and cheap out what their construction issues, and now pour slabs that aren't reinforced, that aren't as thick as what they should be. And down there in Florida, you get all these sinkholes. And I remember one story where a guy was sleeping. He was an adult male living with some family. And the family hears a yell, and a sinkhole happened in his bedroom, and it just swallowed him up, and there's a 20-foot hole. And no sign of him. He's buried alive.
oh
Down in
man.
that, I see something like that down in your country. The last thing I would want to do is pick at it, so I can clear out of there. Hey, one thing that do you know what the fire department does when people get stuck in quicksand or anything like that?
I have no idea.
They call the fire department if somebody's stuck like out in the ocean in quicksand, and they bring ladders. You think, what in the world do they do that? They lay them sideways,
Hmm.
and it spans across where the quicksand is. They can get on top of that, and then they get the the fire hose, and they squirt it down where the legs are, and it digs them out, and they can pull
Hmm.
them up on the ladder and then take them into shore. So if you run into a sinkhole, something that would be wise for you to have down there is an extension ladder. Extend it out, put by it before you start picking at it, because you may disappear.
Might disappear. Someday I'm gonna, but I don't want it to be. I'm not ready yet.
Yeah,
I actually think that it's, we're so far south that, and the sea level's right there. There's canals all around us. So the water level is there, and it's probably the water's just going through the ground, and it's, the ground is wet because we're surrounded by canals and water, and that's what it is.
yeah. It only takes 20 feet of sand to filter the salt out of seawater to make it potable, fresh drinking water.
Well, we got more than that.
So you'd be safe. And that's generally the cleanest water you can find. One of the best natural filters there are. Sand.
Never thought of trying to drink it though. But if I have to, I will.
Well, you can always, pull some out and test it.
I'll have my own pool of Siloam. If I pick away a little bit more.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? Or I'll fall in and disappear.
All right. Well, we're going to have to close this off because I got to get on another one pretty shortly. So it's been good talk. Covered a lot of things. And as I said, I had no idea where we were going to go. We covered a lot of things again.
I thought we might talk about aloe vera, but that's okay. I didn't have an agenda.
Yeah, we actually did. And, it's an introduction, and that could be a bigger conversation later on why you're doing that. So
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time, do be well.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. Have an awesome day. Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
This has been Dr. Brad at Your Health Reclaimed. In these couple sessions with Dr. Mike Haley. Very interesting conversations where we cover a lot of interesting topics that you oftentimes don't hear about. So if you'd like to share this, give us a review to help spread the word around. And we release these every Monday and Thursday. So tune in for the next one. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.